You are listening to Something Rather Than Nothing. Creator and host, Ken Vellante. Editor and producer, Peter Bauer.
Hey everybody, this is Ken Vellante with the Something Rather Than Nothing podcast, and I am so excited to have Elizabeth Coplan, who, my goodness, recent premiere of her play, families in town going to see it. Elizabeth, welcome to the show, and tell us what you're up to right now.
Well, great. Well, thank you, Ken. Well, actually, right now I just finished feeding my family from the ever popular Cat's Delicatessen that is just down the street here in New York, an icon. But my play, Til Death, opened Off-Broadway last Thursday night, as you mentioned. It's at Theater Row on 42nd Street between 9th and 10th, and it will be there till December 23rd. And it's an Abingdon Theatre production directed by Chad Austin that I'm very, very proud of. It's not an easy topic. It's a story of an elderly woman's last day and her family who has come to give her a peaceful death, and what transpires in that 24-hour period. And it is loosely based on about 4 different deaths that I have. Just so I don't want to say part of, because it sounds like I'm killing people, but that I've actually been at people's bedsides and so forth. I work with my nonprofit Grief Dialogues. I've worked with a lot of death doulas and hospice nurses and so forth. So my personal experiences have been illustrated even more by some of their stories they shared with me. So it's a tough topic, and it deals with dysfunctional families, as I would say 99% of most families are, just to various degrees. But I try to do it with some grace and some dignity and humor and some surprises. And that's kind of what theater is all about. So yes, it's called Til Death.
Yeah, that's our intro. I wanted to thank you so much for doing that. I mean, one of the media things I thought of was around within philosophy. Early on, Plato said that philosophy is just a contemplation of death, right? So right. There's this idea, if you look at existential philosophy, what do humans have to deal with? The one crass fact of the high cost of living and death. So
yes.
And just to hear your work on a podcast, Grief Dialogues, in talking about this. So I'm thinking, talking and doing this, how difficult was it for you? Because I see an artist as courageous. I see you doing this as courageous. How difficult was it to, the personal, then out there, and then saying, let's deal with somebody's last day. What's all that? What's that like?
It's very interesting, because when it was just personal, and how this play kind of came about in the first place, there were 3 different deaths that I was dealing with at one time, and at one particular time. And what I found, though, was if I tried to talk to my friends or my coworkers about what I just experienced, like, for example, the loss of my cousin to ovarian cancer, and my sister and I were by her bedside for the last 10 days and so forth. When I went back to work, people often assume when you're gone that you're gone on vacation, right? And so they say, "Oh, how was vacation?" Well, I was on the deathbed of somebody.
Yeah.
And as soon as I said that, they just like, "Oh, I gotta go." I just kind of got this cold shoulder or a lot of very uncomfortable behaviors. And I really couldn't talk to anyone about this very natural and 100% gonna happen to everybody activity called death, right? And dying. And it was so frustrating. And so not being able to share my personal story with anyone, or even even some of my best friends, they would kind of, oh yeah, tell me more. But then if I would say things like, oh, it was so beautiful, it's like, wait a minute, your cousin died and you're saying it's beautiful? How is that beautiful? And so
Yeah.
it just wasn't, even if I could talk to them, it seemed like it wasn't resonating in the way I wanted to really be able to share it. So I turned to actually writing dialogue that then went, oh, I guess this is a play. I've been a theater buff forever. I actually was in New York City right after graduating from high school, thinking I'd be an actress. My favorite line about that is one day I realized I could eat or I could pay rent. I could not do both. So got a college degree and went into marketing. But I've always written. So the art, literally, we have a motto, out of grief comes art. And literally the art, the plays, came out of loss and not being able to talk about it on a personal level. For the most part, with grief dialogues, it's been great to share because I've written some short plays, but for the grief dialogues, the play cycle, I've brought in other playwrights and short plays from them. So any given production of the grief dialogues is generally 6 short plays depicting various scenarios around dying, death, and grief, and some of them are funny, and some of them are serious, and some of them are fantastical, and some of them are realistic. Something that everyone can experience, and so we have that play that usually runs about 90 minutes, maybe a little less, and then we have a talk back, always a talk back, and people don't have to stay. There's a little intermission, but there's a talk back, and it can be with a grief counselor or a social worker, or a hospice worker, or just all sorts of people. And I would say, for the most part, 80% of the audience stays for those talks backs. And and they can share their stories, they can ask questions. And that has really just been the most rewarding experience. We were doing that quite successfully just prior to the pandemic. We had also pivoted to working with hospitals and palliative care doctors, for example. And so we were doing the show with Virginia Mason Hospital in Seattle, with the University of Washington Medical School. And we were just about to go to Detroit to do work with Ford Hospital, when the pandemic hit. So needless to say, that came crashing down. What I did do was I pivoted and took some of those plays and turned them into Zoom plays. And we would go into some conversations, this time not with medical providers, because those people, could not even but they were so busy with all the COVID, they just didn't have time to do that. But I offered it to the general public, and for about a year or so, it was very, very successful. We had a lot of people tuning in. I did it with an organization called Reimagine. That was great. But then that even became a little cumbersome because it's a lot of work to take a play and put it on Zoom and make it work on Zoom, and then have the talkbacks on Zoom. So that's when I went back to working on a full-length play script that I had, that I'd workshopped in 2017. And I then spent 21 and 22 reworking that script, and then finally working with the Abingdon Theatre starting this year to mount it Off-Broadway. And I tell you this story because one of the things that I've noticed is this is meant to be just a straight-on play. And the critics haven't been very kind. And I will be honest that I think in a large part is because they're not comfortable with the topic. They're not comfortable with the topic of death in the way that we present it. Because the people who come to see it who are more experienced, whether it's just that they've had loss in their own life or they're therapists themselves, they seem to really appreciate the play. We're going to have a talk back this Tuesday with Ken Ross. Ken is the son of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who is the founder of the death and dying movement, really, in all her books. And I already noticed, I kind of went on just before we jumped on this podcast here to see ticket sales, and we are sold out. So I actually think that as much as I would like to think that people want to experience death in art in general, that they really want to talk about it even more. Because of the interest we have in the talk back with Ken Ross. So anyway, that's kind of the story of how it came to be. But out of grief comes art really is my motto.
Yeah, thank you so much, and congratulations
Oh,
for
thank
having
you.
that going, and being in the mix of, I think it is, I'm on the outside, so you would experience, the reaction in a different way. But I would say from the outside, just seeing that, yeah, uh, I think a patron going in, it's not just a passing thing, and there's
Right.
a psychological resonance to the material that they're gonna interact with. So it isn't. It's something different, right?
It's
It's
something
something. It's
different.
something
It
different.
is, and what I will say again with the lovely creative process, if you see the key art, which is the key art is a elderly woman with long flowing gray hair. It's
Yeah,
with a lot of
beautiful. Yeah,
black and gray. It's gorgeous. The title
yeah.
Till Death. I mean, we're not painting a picture of coming to see Spamalot. I mean, you really have to realize that you're coming to something that's a little dark, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
so sometimes the
yeah.
reaction are like, well, yeah, didn't think this was going to be a song and dance number, did you? But yeah, and it resonates with people. Last night, actually, the performance at it's 8 scenes, and during scene 8, I heard a lot of sniffling. So to me, also that's a good thing because I also feel it's kind of cathartic. I've had a number of people tell me that they really appreciated coming to the play because during COVID they lost loved ones, not necessarily to COVID, but they lost and they couldn't be by their bedsides, and so that was actually cathartic being on bedside by this woman on the stage. It was actually a wonderful, just really resonated with some people. So
Yeah, I
the
think it
beauty of
could be.
art.
I think it could be really helpful. Just in a recent period, like late summer through fall, lost some folks
Mm,
and some surprises, and it was there was a reaction for me, almost like ducking and hiding. Like I want to just
right.
be like, no, no more, no more, no more incoming. And but I think you doing this is really a spectacular thing. I would say, just without going deeper into it, I would say that the topic is you know one of which I wish to learn more and become more resilient.
Right.
So I appreciate your work on that. I wanted to ask you, Elizabeth, going back, you talked a little bit about your bumping up against art and being artistic. When did you see yourself as an artist, as an artistic
Um,
person?
well, actually, that's an interesting question. I would have said when I was 13, when my mother forced me to take a class in drama because I was too shy. But in sharing with you earlier, I'm going to change that answer because I wrote a short story in the third grade that I had to read it out loud in class, and people really, really enjoyed it. And I remember, and I stood up in front of the class. And I remember not only the story, but although I don't remember the actual story, but what I do remember was the fun and the exhilaration of standing up and reading something that I could feel that my classmates were like really leaning into. And I guess that's a little bit of performance art right there. So
Yeah.
I'm going to say at an early age, I really did enjoy the arts, in this case, maybe more dramatic art. But even as I got older and didn't have time for performance art, I love to write. So I
Yeah.
write personal essays, just all kinds of things. And I had a 40-year career in marketing, so I did a lot of writing around that. Not necessarily artistic writing, but definitely, you have to be pretty creative in writing marketing and advertising
Oh
copies. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I wanted to mention something on that. It's just a realization I had recently that because I want to always do more writing creatively, and I work as a union rep in my day job, and all I do is process and write. And I remember thinking one time, like, I was like, oh man, shit, I ain't doing any writing, like, and I reminded myself, like, this. Like, it's technical. There's creative flourishes. I put a lot of effort into it in making my argument, and I'm like,
Hmm.
no, you're keeping up those. If you want to write something else, that's fine. But that type of writing, I think sometimes we forget about that, and
Right.
the deep, like, you are writing. You're writing and harnessing those skills, and you just got to kind of transform over. I think a lot of people, I mean, I didn't even think about that overtly. I think a lot of people miss how they're working their muscles, you know?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, Elizabeth, what is art?
What is art? That's a good question. Oh boy, I should have really thought about that one. To me, art is anything that, well, I shouldn't say anything, but art is something that comes from the heart, whether it's a melody or a poem, words. Or my sister is an artist she paints and she draws beautiful work, and I think it's anything that it's in your heart and your head, and you put it in some sort of external form. I don't. If you just have the ideas percolating in your head, those are ideas. That's not art. To me, art has to be literally a physical, some sort of creative process, physical process that takes what's in your head and puts it into some tangible form, whether it's sheet music or whatever. So yeah, I think that's taking ideas and presenting them in such a way that other people that it feels approachable to other people, I think.
I like
Yeah.
that. I like that. I like that a lot. I wanted to ask you within Till Death. It's obviously a big project. You want to mention some of the folks you have working on making this thing
Yes.
real?
Well, I'll start with the Abingdon Theatre Company itself. Chad Austin is the director, and he is called a producing director. And if you go to the Abingdon Theatre Company's website, right there on the homepage it says "Brave New Work," and they really embrace this, and Chad in particular. So when he not only saw the script and cast the script, and we have Tony Award winners Judy, Kaye, Bob Cuccioli. We have TV veteran Amy Hargreaves on it. We have young Michael Lee Brown, he was Dear Evan Hansen on Broadway for quite a while. We have Whitney Morse, who's making her Off-Broadway debut. We have Dominick LaRuffa Jr. Those are the 6 cast members. They're incredible. But the play really becomes an entire piece of art to me, because Chad is not only taking my words and casting it with those people and putting my words in their mouths and telling them how to move, but he's put it on a stage that is a work of art. The set is not, I wrote the play to be set in a living room. I originally thought it would be in a community theater, maybe regional theater if I was lucky, and it would just be a simple living room set, lights up, lights down. Well, once Chad got a hold of it, it was much more representational, and the set itself, I can send you some pictures. Well, it's almost like a maze of stucco walls on which they do projections. So,
oh my goodness!
Projections of and what is so cool is because there's a theme in the script about photo albums, but rather than have actual photo albums mounting and piling up, which is the way I originally had it, he's got the photos being projected on these walls of the set. Now, what's really cool about that is he asked the actual actors to send the designer photos from their various ages. So when you see, for example, there is a picture of Lucy, the character of Lucy, played by Amy Hargreaves, when she's 18. Well, the picture that's up there is actually a picture of Amy Hargreaves at 18.
That's incredible. Right? I love that.
And then it references that in the play, it's referenced, for example, that she's in a photo that they're looking at, wearing a green jacket, I believe. So the artist has taken that photo of 18-year-old Amy Hargreaves and photoshopped a green jacket onto it. So it looks like it's exactly what she's looking at in the album. The characters of the mother, Mary, and her husband, Michael, they recently married. So what someone has, again, the designer's done, is taken a picture of Mary looking very lovely and Michael looking very handsome. The actors and then photoshopping together so it looks like an actual wedding picture. So really using the actor's own image is not just representational, but their actual images at a certain point in their life and making it into this family's photo album, which is just incredible. And then the additional thing is, because the character Anne the story is kind of told through Anne's eyes, and she is an artist. She's a portrait painter, if you will. And so they've also done some original portraits of the characters that then kind of are projected onto the set. So again, you look at this, then the set itself, Chad chose a palette of grays and blues, very soft, kind of muted colors, and everything on the stage is that. So the chairs are gray, and the sofa is a light gray, and the costumes, it's set in present day, but the costumes, the characters are wearing navy and off-white, and it just all looks like this lovely. I don't know. I was a big fan of Picasso's Blue period.
Oh my goodness! Yes,
it reminds me of that. Although now I know more about Picasso, and I'm not a big fan of Picasso's, but I am a big fan of Picasso's blue phase, blue era. So it's called.
Yeah,
that's what this set reminds me of. It definitely reminds me of just an overall work of art. And then you have the acting, and then My Words is only, to me, it feels like just 1/8 of the whole thing. Anyway, yeah, you almost have to see it to believe it.
Well, it is exciting. I love to hear, kind of like the animate. I think a lot of times, at least on my show, when something comes together, I like to know how it comes together and the hands that are in there. And I can't imagine like the vision that you have. Like, I get excited, like, as far as the artist, like when you work in collaboration and you had an idea of what that room would be. And when you saw, what that had developed, you'd be like, wait a second, what is all, like that somebody is kind of developing out and creating a way of seeing. And that's the
exactly.
piece. Working together on art. That's the big thing, behind my show. Like, it's all about a collective. So I like, all I do is every day is I just organize people to make things better or to stick up for themselves. And then, when you see it with art, when you see it like an organizing around art, or when people get together and create the bigger thing, there's just so much great energy. It could go in different directions. It can bump together and crash and burn and not happen, or it could come together and bring in. And I saw the incredible cast. I mean, I can't imagine. I can't imagine you like sitting back again, then seeing the set and being like, "Whoa!" Like cast this thing too. So
that's No, I should add that the Chad actually also brought in some original music. There's some original music to this piece, which again I didn't cross my mind, but the sound is very important. He brought that in. The cast has been extraordinary, and again the collaborative spirit that just jumped out of this project became to me just very vital. So it got cast. Now the actors that were cast brought to it certain talents that maybe I did not explore in my character development. So then one of my jobs was to go back and take the script and upgrade, if you will, some of the dialogue between the characters, because now I have this, in the case of Judy Kaye, for example, I have this wonderful, sensitive musical actress who really puts forth this loving mother vibe without any effort, and now I can work with that a little bit more. And originally that role actually didn't have much dialogue, but now I have an actor that can really handle the tough dialogue. So that I had an opportunity to play with that. The other one that I played a lot with that I enjoyed. So Michael E. Brown is a young man, as I mentioned. He was in Dear Evan Hansen. Now I have his character is Nick, and he's 16 years old. But this is a young actor that's really, really talented. So he had just minor dialogue, really. And now I have this great actor. So that role is completely changed, much more substantial than what I had originally written because of who was cast in it. And Bob Cuccioli was the original character of Michael was supposed to be very curmudgeon-y and kind of a villain. And then all of a sudden I've got this debonair, Tony nominated musical theater guy that nobody was going to believe was a villain, right? Nobody. So then I had the really hard task of changing that character to fit with the actor. And it actually, I'll be honest, at first I resisted because for the last, 5 years, that has been a curmudgeonly old man. But once I got into it, I realized that by embracing the actor in this role, I could actually make the script even richer. So
you could let the old character. You could let the old character die. Yeah, you had some.
Yeah, exactly.
No, it is great to hear. I tell you too. Just as far as my experience of it. The great PR person Andrea Alton introduced us to each other, and I tell you, it's been so wonderful to connect with her and to connect with these plays. I'm originally from out in Rhode Island, so so I live out in Oregon now. But there's whenever I've been able to bump up with the show up against Broadway, and it's exciting. It's exciting to me because, knowing the city, you mentioned Kat's Delicatessen. I was thinking of Yona Schimmel's Knishes over there. So my brain jumped. And let's pause there. Yona Schimmel's still around over there in Brooklyn?
I don't know. I lived here back in the 70s, and I
got you.
Over there.
I remember I remember the good thing was because it was my early 20s, didn't have any money, and New York City, in case you haven't heard, folks, is rather expensive. But you could go to Yona Schimmel's, you can get a bag of Knishes and some mustard and salt and pepper, and you could go for a good day and a half, 2 days with that meal.
At least a good day and a half, yes. That's sick to your ribs food.
So good, the sights and sounds and smells of New York City. Elizabeth, the role of art. What do you think the role of art is? I mean, what should it be doing for us?
To me, that's probably the most important thing other than, food and love. I think the next category would be art because, well, I'll give you for example, I'm just finished reading this book called Chatter, and it talks about how being in nature calms you. And I don't know about you, but I always got chatter going on, and it's not in my brain, and it's not necessarily helpful. But by being in nature, just your whole body just kind of relax. But the cool thing is you don't have to go to the woods. You can actually get the same effects, according to this book, by looking at a painting of the woods or the seaside, or so you can be among art. You can go to the Met and have the same thing happen, or you can so you can experience art. The same thing with music. It can excite you. It can calm you down. There's just so many ways that art actually gets in your bones in a positive way. That I think that really food, water, air kind of category, and love. We all need love, and if you then have art in some form, that's what life's all about to me. And I think it's also a way. I think a lot of people will say to me, actually, they'll say, "Oh, you're so creative. I'm not that creative." And I often say, baloney on that. You're creative in some way. You just maybe don't know quite what your outlet might be. But there's all kinds of ways. You don't have to write the great American novel. You could write a haiku poem, or you could doodle. It doesn't even have to be fine art. Just anything that kind of releases whatever you're feeling, emotional stress. I have a friend who does the coloring books. She loves to color, and that's fine too. It doesn't have to be fine art, I guess is what I'm saying. But I think it's vital. I think the role of art it's so sad that one of the things is schools, when they look to cut budgets, the first thing they do is they cut art. And that is, that is just so wrong, because kids, so many times I see kids that, put them on the stage, put them backstage, learning a trade,
Yeah.
Doing some sort of art form. I've seen it transform a lot of kids who are troubled. A lot of kids are having trouble processing things they're going through. If they have some sort of art expression, it's just, I could go on for days, and I think there are studies, but I don't know.
I agree, because and part of it too with art, there's process of making, doing, within it that can be part of your art practice, but you can also experience the art, whatever it is, in and of itself as a complete experience. And I find the show, the show, doing art philosophy, and I say art philosophy and liberation, people
Right. Oh, yes.
trying to find who they are and state who they are. But yeah, I part of the thing I mentioned, my labor rep work. Well, I'm labor rep in K-12 schools, and so here's the thing. It absolutely destroys me and kills me when we look at just the amount of students, the way they come about things, their diverse talents, neurodiversity, everything all around. And we haven't fixed this, but we got a narrow corridor of hit these basics and testing the basics. Meanwhile, we just completely ignore neuroscience and what music, sticking your hands in glue and paper and plays. And, kids are suffering. So for me, I agree with you. It isn't just, I remember our society did this, or did it ever do this?
Right.
Kids literally aren't being served by not having those options, because they're not able to develop. And that just pisses me off about the system.
Yes, absolutely. Me too. And, I think now, I'm not going to say I would be living on the streets necessarily, but who I would have been if I didn't have a robust theater program to have gone into when I was 13. And what would I probably would have been fine, but I shudder to think, because I was very shy. So I don't think I would have accomplished what I have, not just in my art, but, I had a good 40-year marketing career. My husband and I had our own business, raised 2 sons. They're now grown and so forth. I have a level of confidence, I feel, that I gained by that drama class when I was 13. So to think kids don't have those opportunities now is just heartbreaking to me.
Yeah. And and one of the things, there's a lot of people fight for it, and for me, when it comes to the human brain, the human brain just needs a whole bunch of different angles and colors. The things you talked about, feeling better with colors, seeing things. I wanted to ask you. So it's a little bit different. Like, so there's the big question: why is there something rather than nothing, right?
Right.
And I don't want to mix it up or anything like that, but I think, like, in some of the things we're talking about, mortality, finitude, death, and like I said, the Plato saying, philosophy, this contemplation of death, this brute fact. And I think that the question I ask is about creation, but it's also about meaning. And so for I wanted to ask you, like, the question itself is either two ways. Why is there something rather than nothing? Or upon death, is there something or nothing?
Right. Actually, those are both very good questions. I will take the second one, because actually my play goes into that topic. Without giving too much away, there is a scene between Mary, the elderly woman who is dying, and her 16-year-old grandson. And Nick, the grandson, asks Mary if if she believes in heaven, I believe, because his father does not. His father does not believe in heaven. And he jokingly says, my dad believes when you're dead, and that usually gets a big laugh from the audience. Mary responds with that she's not quite sure if she believes in heaven, but what she does believe is that a person's spirit lives on, and that spirit is there to help and guide those left behind. And she says to Nick something like, "And I will be with you when I'm dead." And he just he loves the idea of his grandma. They have a very special relationship. He shares his secrets with her and always has, and that sort of thing. So to think that your loved one is still there, I think, whether it's nothing out of something or something out of nothing, I think that's really, that there is definitely something after the end. Again, I'm not sure if it's eternal reward, but there's a presence. I know myself, one of the reasons I wrote this play is I often feel the presence of my father and or my mother, who are two very different personalities. So to have them kind of, in the room behind me when I'm dealing with an issue or even being creative, I can channel my mom. I just think that I just feel their presence a lot. And in the play, Nick's mom, Lucy, who's a trial attorney, says that she feels the presence of her dad, who died many years ago, that strong presence and that confident presence. She feels him when she's in court, when she's in a trial. She feels her dad. So I definitely think that even that there's not nothing. There's definitely something afterwards, and it may just be the spirit of someone you care about is walking alongside you, particularly in times of stress. I think that's really important.
I love that. I'm glad. I'm happy to hear you say that presence. And, for me, it just seems like on the question, something rather than nothing, life and death and afterlife. I've talked to so many people. You can't tell a human being that they can't feel something or somebody near them. You can't tell humans that. And I don't know, whatever that mystery is, that's that feels pretty super. So everybody, we've been talking with Elizabeth Coplan and just chatting. And one of the things I'm really excited to hear about as we finish up here, Elizabeth, is just kind of like where folks can find the play, your art, where people can be like, hey, I want to learn some more. Oh, and the podcast as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, the best place to go is griefdialogues.com. And if you click on the tab that says art, there's a drop-down box, and it has stories. We take submissions for people who write stories or poems. We've also have some artwork on there. We take those submissions, so you can see all of those under stories. But we also there's a journal where I often write a blog post. There's a link to a couple of movies. One I wrote, one called Honoring Choices. One I was executive producer on called 8 a.m. There's a link to the play, Til Death. If you're in the New York area, it is running at Theater Row on 42nd Street until December 23rd. And after that, we'll have a link to where it is too. There will also be licensing opportunities for it. It's a short play. It's about 75 minutes, so it lends itself really well to being performed and then having an opportunity for people to discuss it. That's really what I wanted. I like my plays to be about, the discussion process. So going to griefdialogues.com, click on all the things. You can learn more about me. You can contact me. It'll have all the art. It'll have the podcast under art. And some resources. We partner with a lot of great organizations to give additional information on additional help for people who need, whether it's grief counseling or medical aid, information on medical aid in dying, which is legal in 11 states. There's how to set up an advanced care program, that sort of thing. Just a little bit of everything. But when you come to it, we do have I hope people will go to, even if it's just to the homepage, because we have a beautiful sort of video of splashes of color, and then the term "out of grief comes art." So it's really just a very soothing, fun thing to look at. Just come to our website and check it out.
Love it. What was the website again?
griefdialogues.com.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, I got to tell you, Elizabeth, so nice to chat with you.
Oh, absolutely.
And again, big shout out to Andrea Alton. I mean, I know for me, putting me close proximity to Broadway, and it's clear, Elizabeth, chatting with you, you've been doing philosophy your whole life, so
Yes.
philosophy and meeting and all these big questions, and just really congratulations for. I mean,
Oh, thank you.
putting any art out there is
Oh,
it's a,
you have to.
it's a big thing.
It's like ripping open your chest, to be honest with you, and allowing people to take pot shots, especially if they're not comfortable with your topic. But
Yeah.
but I'm glad I did. I am
Yeah.
glad I did. I'm hoping more people will talk about about life and death and what's important to them. Another big theme for me for this play is saying goodbye and realizing that you don't have to be like near someone who's dying to say goodbye. They may be already gone, and there's no time limit on saying goodbye and saying I love you, and that's really what this play to me is all about.
That's a beautiful thing. I've in conclusion, I've had a guest on, Lauren Rhodes, and
Mm.
Lauren is really incredible. Does like a lot of cemetery stuff and dealing with death and art around that. But she had a magazine for a while that it really kind of helped me in this area, and she collected it in a book, and it was called Morbid Curiosity Cures the Blues.
Yes,
And
I'm familiar with that. Yes.
it's just there's something freeing around it all, that like it's okay, these things exist, you can look, you can be uncomfortable, you can spend time, you can read these stories, you can hear people talking about these things, and it is not easy. It's about as
Mm.
difficult as you can imagine, maybe at points, but I think there's something about you doing that and that type of curiosity and wonder about the discomfort, which for me is a good process to encourage. And
Mhm.
best of luck, everybody. Check this
Oh, thank
out,
you.
and just hopefully kill it over on Broadway,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like
yeah.
literally, I guess.
I would, yeah, literally, and I would love to do that. I'm not sure if it's, most people. Well, what I'd like to do with it is to make discussions around death normal, and so however it goes, whether it's Broadway or theaters across the country, if we could start talking about an act we're all going to do. We are all going to die. So if we could start talking about it, not be so afraid of it, and embrace the beauty around it, I think it'll help us all, really. But thank you so much. I just really enjoyed talking with you, and I love your topics, and creativity makes me smile. I love it. Thank you.
It makes me smile too. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. And I will say this in conclusion, is that I definitely want to make it out east, and it makes it a little bit to visit and such. And I start
Mm.
thinking about Broadway. I start thinking about New York City. I'm up in Rhode Island, but I know once I get out that way, I can take the train down to New York City.
Yes.
So I'll hopefully make it over that way.
Yes.
And I know you're based, just as far as folks for the show being based out in Oregon. I believe, Elizabeth, you're based up in Seattle, not too far north of
I'm
where I
based in
am.
Seattle, Washington. Yes, yes, and we've
Yeah.
actually done quite a few productions of Grief Dialogues out there, and hopefully we'll do another production this coming year when I'm back in Seattle. So that would be great.
That's great to hear. Love to Seattle. I'm a transplant to Oregon, so a lot of times I don't dig into rivalries or city rivalries. I just I'm like I don't have that bag. So like I adore
Yeah.
Seattle. I
Oh,
adore
good.
Portland. I adore Seattle sports teams. I
Oh,
adore
thank you.
Portland.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks again, Elizabeth, and
Thank you.
best of luck with everything.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much.
This is Something Rather Than Nothing.
listeners, to stay connected with us and our guests, visit somethingratherthannothing.com. Join our mailing list for exclusive updates and access to guest-created art. If you enjoyed this episode or any episode, please like, subscribe, leave a review on your podcast platform. People really read that shit. Your support helps us reach more listeners and spread our community across the planet. This is a global show, and we like to give a shout out to our many listeners across the world, including many listeners in Canada, Spain, Germany, UK, Argentina, Brazil, India, Thailand, and so many more places. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at Something Rather Than Nothing Podcast for behind-the-scenes content. And the best way to help the show is to tell your friends about us. If you love it, they'll love it too. Tell your friends who love it. We love you. This is Something Rather Than Nothing Podcast.